So let's talk about Friedrich Nietzsche. This guy wasn't your typical philosopher, sitting in an ivory tower. He saw himself as more of a doctor for culture. He took one long, hard look at Western civilization and basically said, "You're sick." And he spent his entire life trying to figure out a diagnosis, calling for a complete reinvention of what it means to be human.
And of course, there's his most famous, most explosive line, "God is dead." It's designed to grab you by the collar, for sure. But here's the thing a lot of people miss. This wasn't a celebration for him. For Nietzsche, this was an alarm bell. It was the announcement of the single greatest crisis in the history of humanity.
So, what on earth did he really mean by that? It wasn't just about religion fading away. No, it was so much bigger. The death of God meant the collapse of the entire moral and philosophical system that had propped up the Western world for 2,000 years. The very foundation was gone.
All right, so here's how we're going to unpack all of this. We'll start with what he saw as the two primal forces that shaped everything. Then we'll get into his wild theory about how reason killed art. From there, we'll look at his radical prescription for us all, the will to power. And finally, we'll have to grapple with the complicated and controversial legacy of Nietzsche's lasting shadow.
To really get Nietzsche's diagnosis, you have to go back in time with him, all the way to ancient Greece, in his first major book, The Birth of Tragedy. He argued that art, and really all of human existence, is a battleground between two primal competing forces.
So picture this cosmic tug of war. In one corner you have Apollo. He's the god of order, logic, and beautiful dreams. He represents the self, the individual, and all the neat, tidy illusions we create to make life bearable. And in the other corner, you have Dionysus. He's the god of wine, chaos, pure emotion. He represents the complete opposite, the shattering of the self, where you dissolve into this wild, primal, universal feeling. Now, the absolute genius of the ancient Greeks, Nietzsche said, was that they didn't choose a side. Instead, they slammed these two opposites together into what he called a yoke of marriage, and this tense, perfect balance created Greek tragedy, for him, the highest art form ever. Why? Because it let people stare directly into the abyss, into the terrors and horrors of existence, and still come out affirming life. They were literally saved by art.
But, and this is a massive but for Nietzsche, this perfect balance was incredibly fragile, and it didn't last. He argued that this amazing art form, tragedy, actually died by suicide. It was destroyed from the inside out.
Nietzsche basically lays out a cosmic crime scene for us. The victim? Greek tragedy, with all its raw Dionysian power. The murder weapon? Something he calls despotic logic, a cold, sterile rationality that simply cannot handle chaos or mystery. And the mastermind behind it all? A totally new kind of thinker, Socrates.
And look, Nietzsche does not mince words. He calls Socrates the vortex and turning point of Western civilization. He's basically saying this one guy altered the entire trajectory of human history, sending us down a completely new and, in Nietzsche's eyes, a very dangerous path.
And that new path was Socratism. It's the belief, which Nietzsche calls a grand metaphysical illusion, that pure reason can solve everything, that with enough logic we can make existence completely understandable and justified. But in the process of tidying everything up, Socrates and his student Plato put philosophy above poetry. They killed off myth, and they snuffed out that essential, chaotic Dionysian spirit.
Okay, so the diagnosis is in. Civilization is weak, suffering from an overdose of reason. So what's the cure? If the old values are dead and gone, what new energy can possibly drive us forward? This is where he gets to his most potent and probably most misunderstood idea. The will to power. Now, let's be clear. This is not just about dominating other people. That's the big mistake everyone makes. For Nietzsche, this is the basic, fundamental drive in all life. It's the same energy that pushes a tiny plant to grow towards the sun or an artist to create a masterpiece. It is that deep inner urge for self-assertion, for overcoming your own limits, and for expanding your influence on the world, to grow and become more.
And the ultimate goal of this will to power? To create the Übermensch, or the overman. And again, this isn't some superhero in a cape. It's the person who, in a world without cosmic rules, has the incredible courage to rise above the comfortable, mediocre herd morality. The overman doesn't just follow old values. They create new ones. They justify their own life not through logic, but aesthetically, like a work of art.
So, what happened? Did Nietzsche's prescription take? Well,
His ideas ended up casting a long, complicated, and incredibly controversial shadow over the 20th century that stretches all the way to today.
Honestly, it's almost impossible to overstate his influence. His assault on objective truth and morality became the bedrock for so many major movements. You can feel his presence in the soul-searching of existentialism, and you can absolutely see it in the work of post-structuralist thinkers like Foucault and Derrida, who took his ideas about power and language and ran with them.
But we have to face the darker side of his legacy. There's no way around it. His concepts of the will to power and the Übermensch were horribly twisted and co-opted, most infamously by the Nazis, tying his philosophy to hateful ideologies that he himself would have despised. It's a complicated and often ugly part of his story.
This quote really just brings it all back to his original diagnosis. This is us, modern humanity, as he saw us, spiritually starving. We're surrounded by history, but we feel disconnected from it, famished because we've rationalized away our mythic home, the very thing that used to give life depth and meaning.
And that leaves us with Nietzsche's final provocative challenge, a question that rings even louder today than it did over a century ago. If the old foundations are really gone, if God is dead and reason alone isn't enough, what's next? Are we strong enough to become the creators of our own values?